And when I woke up, when I came to in the hospital, I remember seeing these bright white bandages. And I remember for the first time, I could probably say ever, that I felt hope. I felt that something was going to be different. I just felt this, almost like this flicker of light inside, all this darkness that I had just kind of started. And you know, you can call it a moment of clarity, spiritual awakening, whatever it was, I had that. And I knew from that point forward that I was never going to have to live like that again. And I knew that my life was going to be different. And I didn't know how. I didn't know how I was going to get there. But there was just something, I think it was more that I just felt, if I lived through that, right, you know, if God wasn't ready to take me, then there must be a reason. There's got to be something better out there. And that was the first time I had ever really felt that. And so I became willing, and I took suggestions. And obviously the first suggestion was you need to go to rehab. Once again, I was transferred to the psych ward, because that's where they put you when you do that. And they assessed me, and you know, instead of saying, you know, this girl's got, you know, severe mental issues, it was clear, this girl, you're an addict, you're a drug addict, and you're an alcoholic, and you need help. And so I said, all right, sign me up, what do I have to do? And so they got me a bed in a rehab, and it was at White Deer Run in Allenwood, Pennsylvania, which is literally in the middle of nowhere. BFD, turn left, and then make a right. So it was a perfect place for me to go and be sober. It was out of the city, you know, it was surrounded by nature, which was the point, and it was wonderful. And when I got there, again, I had this willingness. I was just willing to admit I had a problem, which obviously, as some of you probably heard the cliche, that is the first step. I was willing to finally say, drugs and alcohol are my problem. And that was huge for me. And so in rehab, it was all about, you know, getting rid of all that stuff I hid, bringing to the surface all those past traumas, and talking about the sexual assault, and learning how to put feelings in words and associate them so that I could really fully try to start healing from all of this. I truly believe, and this worked for me, that in order for an addict to not pick up again, you have to go backwards. You have to look at your past, and you have to look at the reasons why you drink, because drinking is just, this is a symptom of my problem. And my problems are the reasons why I pick this up and why I choose to drink as a coping mechanism. And so that really clicked with me early on. And a saying that they told me was, secrets will keep you sick. And that really clicked for me. I thought, okay, that makes sense, because I have a lot of secrets. And I felt so incredibly unique within my secrets. And it wasn't until I got to rehab and I heard other women share my story and say things that I had always felt and had always thought. And here I thought I was so unique. And I felt for once that I wasn't alone and that I could recover. And so I spent 30 days in rehab. And they said, you know, you can't go home. Your home environment is not a functional place for you to be. You know, we recommend you go to a halfway house. And so then I went to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which is another version of BFD. Yes, gosh. And I lived in a halfway house, or a sober living environment, as some people call it. And again, with other women just trying to get well like I was. And I was making incredible progress, and I was really diving into my issues, and I had, you know, I jokingly say that the bright kind of academic, wonderful child that I was, I held her captive in this like cocaine-induced stupor, right, for like 10 years. And so once I put down the drink and the drug, I woke her up. And so I was really eager about recovery, and I wanted to learn, and I was so excited just to be alive that, you know, I was like this sponge. I read a million books, and I just wanted life for the first time in so long. And it was wonderful, and I was getting so many wonderful things back. And so I eventually, they tell you there's a lot of things that you shouldn't do in your first year of recovery. One of them is you shouldn't get into a relationship. And I was really good at taking a lot of the suggestions, and I did not take that one. And I got into a relationship. Because what I had known through the dysfunction of my kind of sexuality development and the incidences of assault was that I also used men as an escape. And so I got into a relationship. It wasn't very functional, but it did do something really important for me, and that was that it moved me to State College, Pennsylvania, because that's where he lived. And I moved there, and ultimately I first moved there to be with him. And I quickly learned that, you know, if I was really going to do this recovery thing and do it 100%, that, you know, I needed to not be in a relationship. And then getting back to that whole secrets will keep you sick thing, I also realized, you know, hi, I'm gay. Okay, I've been gay. I've always known I was gay. And it was something that I hid, and it was one of my darkest, biggest secrets. And so in recovery, recovery is all about being honest. It's about being brutally honest. And so I had to become honest about this part of my life. And I did. And so I found myself in State College, Pennsylvania, which, if you know, it is home to the Pennsylvania State University. So I thought, I'm gonna go to college, because I was in counseling. I was going to meetings, going to recovery meetings constantly. I had a sponsor. I was doing all that I needed to do, but I was also going to more structured individual therapy to deal with past trauma. And that was really an important part of my recovery for me. And my therapist said to me one day, Jennifer, you can go to college. I'll hook you up with the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, and you can try. And I had lived in State College for a year, so I had a residency there. And so I wrote to them. And in my essay, I basically told the story that I just told you. And they, lo and behold, they accepted me. Me, my 1.5, my no SATs, they took me. I was like, holy crap. So I was ecstatic, and I became a freshman in 1999. And it was wonderful. And I dove into academics just with the same vigor that I dove into recovery. And I just started shaping this incredible life for myself. And I came out of the closet, and I remember vividly sitting my father and my stepmother down, and I was so scared, and I knew I had to tell them. And I had been a student for a year and a half, and I had watched a lot of my friends, gay friends, come home from break and having been thrown out of their homes or having been disowned because they had come out to their parents over break. And so, I had all this, I had all this anxiety, and it's so unfortunate that society teaches us that the people that we love the most won't love us back if they know this one thing about us, right? So I sat my parents down, and I was shaking, and I was sobbing uncontrollably. And I finally got the words out. My parents were just mortified. And when I say parents, I mean my mother, my stepmother, and my father. And so I uttered, I'm gay, and my dad goes, oh, thank God you're not pregnant. So it was like, that was all he was really worried about. He was just worried that I was pregnant. I'm like, well, that's not going to happen, actually. I'm good now. They struggled a little bit with it. My father was actually really good. It was my stepmother that had a little bit of a hard time with it. And I think that sometimes moms with daughters have a harder time because it's like they can't, rationalize the being in love with another woman, whereas my father was like, yeah, I totally get it, there with you. So, my mom struggled a little bit, but she eventually came around, and I had a good experience. I think my family at that point had been through so much that this was just a little bump in the road, and they were just happy that I was sober, and clearly not pregnant. So I became very involved on campus, and I know I'm nearing my 45-minute mark, so I will wrap this up quickly. I became very involved on campus, and I signed up for everything. I was the political co-director of our Orlando Student Alliance. I was the director of LGBT affairs for our undergraduate student government. I was the president of my sorority. I sat on Pan-Atlantic Council. It was ridiculous. I was making up for lost time, seriously, because I didn't experience high school like most people did. I didn't go, I really didn't have a formal education, so I got that at Penn State, and it was wonderful. And while I was at Penn State, and I was very involved in activism, I became a victim of a hate crime. And so it got me very involved in hate crime legislation, which at the time, Pennsylvania did not have inclusive hate crime legislation. And so upon graduation, I took a position in Harrisburg to fight for that very piece of legislation. And we did get that piece of legislation in 2002. It was enacted. It was one of the most inclusive hate crimes legislations in the nation. Unfortunately, it has since been overturned. But it was a huge accomplishment. And after that, the organization that I was working for, that was their purpose. They were built around that purpose, and they kind of slowly started to disband after that, and a position came available with a victim service organization. And I didn't really know what victim services was. I didn't know that they existed. And so I applied for the position, and that's when I really learned about victims' rights. And I am now the executive director of the Dauphin County Victim Witness Assistance Program. And we are a nonprofit organization that provides free and confidential services to all crime victims. And the first case that I worked on was a 12-year-old rape victim. And part of what we do is we walk them through the criminal justice process. So we are physically there with them. We're present for everything, the interviews in court, all that. And so I'm walking this child through this process. And I happened to be 28 years old at that time. And that experience for me was one of the most healing experiences I'd ever had. That child gave so much more to me that she'll never know than I was really able to offer her, because it finally allowed me to see through the eyes of a 28-year-old what 12 really looks like. And 12 is really young. And I spent so many years carrying around this guilt and this shame because of the first sexual assault. You know, I was 12, my offender was 28. And as most rape victims do, we blame ourselves. We find a reason to make it our fault. And as most children do. I mean, the dynamic with children making something to their fault is just huge. I mean, I thought it was my fault. And so I knew in that moment that God had me right where I needed to be and right where I was supposed to be in my life. And I now give back in a way that is just such a huge blessing, and I love my work. And so I started writing a lot as a healing outlet, and that's kind of where Blackout Girl came from. It was an extension of my healing process and my recovery work. And I knew I had a unique story, even though I knew it wasn't unique. And I'm an avid reader, and I didn't read a lot of books that mirrored my story for me. And so I wanted to put something out in society that mirrored my experience, and that wasn't a drunkalogue, and that didn't glorify the disease, because a lot of recovery, addiction memoirs, all they do is talk about how drunk they got and how, I remember I read Smash, and I was like, dear Lord, I mean, how drunk can you get? And is there any hope in this book? And I didn't find it in the pages of those books, not to discredit brilliant writer, but I just didn't get hope as a recovering person out of that book. And so I chose to break my anonymity and share my story. And so I have been clean and sober since November of 1997. So it has been 11 and a half years since I picked up a drink or a drug. And, I'm, like I said in the beginning, I'm a very grateful recovering alcoholic and addict. And it is the first disclaimer that I attribute to myself, because without that, I have nothing. And so I want to, again, just thank Dave so much for having me here. And I know I went over a little bit of time, but I apologize. And please, if you have any questions or comments, I would love to take them. Hopefully I didn't just traumatize you all.
Questions?
Yes.
Looking back, what do you think would have helped you most in that period of 12 to 15 when you were really young?
I think if there would have been someone in my life who would have just talked to me, who would have really tried to talk to me, and maybe not necessarily, that kind of traditional therapy style sit down and, but just to let me know that they understood what I was going through, or that they even acknowledged that I was going through something and that it wasn't like a scary, freaky thing, that they were there to help. What I do now in my life, I have two nieces that I adore. They are just my life. And I make sure each and every day that they know that I am there for them, that I love them unconditionally, that I will do and give and provide anything for them. And I didn't have that. My family, my parents were my dad didn't know how to, still to this day doesn't know how to express himself. Like, he'll tell me he loves me and he hugs me and he can do that, but he doesn't know how to sit down and have like an emotional conversation. Like, if we even try to talk about some of the past things, he'll break down and he can't function. So he just didn't have the ability to do that. And I did have a couple, there are these people that I call seed planters that I think are very important in the lives of everyone, but particularly in the lives of addicts, because it is the most frustrating task to try to help an addict. It really is, because until that addict is ready to get the help that they need, you can't reach them fully. But you can absolutely plant the seed. And what I mean by that is that you can let them know that you're there. You can let them know that you know that they have a problem. And because we hear that, we might tell you to go bleep yourself. I'm being very PC for the TV. They might tell you to go fly a kite, but they're going to remember that, And I do vividly remember those in my life who would say, Jennifer, you're messed up. Like, you don't drink like other people. You have a problem. When you do this, X happens, And it didn't enable me. I didn't have enough of those people in my life. But I think that that's something that you can do for other individuals, is don't enable them, be honest with them. And unfortunately, what that means for you is that you may lose them. You might have to suffer that loss. Just hopefully with the knowledge that something that you said to them planted a seed that will hopefully at some later date help them heal. Yes.
Another question.
Yes.
So you said that you had kind of this very difficult high school, middle school kind of time. My question, maybe it's because I'm going to be a teacher in a bit, is weren't your teachers noticing some differences, and what was going on there? Because it seems like that's an obvious place that the education system.
You know, they did. The tag phrase for me was always, you're such a brilliant child if you would just, you know, apply yourself, attend class, show up. You know, but no one really, and this is the only person in my school that really took more time out to really try to be there for me and to encourage me was actually our wrestling coach. Both my brothers were wrestlers, and it wasn't because I was really that affiliated with wrestling, it was because he always oversaw detention. And so he knew me really well. I was always in in-school suspension, I was always in detention. And so he, for me, was one of those seed planters, and he would try to talk to me, to the degree that he could. You know, but my guidance counselors, I have to be honest, I did not have good, positive experiences with my guidance counselors. And I don't know if maybe just they didn't have the training at that time to deal with sexual trauma and assault. I think that it's much better now, and I think that teachers are more equipped, but maybe they're not. So it would have been helpful to have more people reach out. And reach out to my parents, too. No one reached out to my parents and said, hey, what the heck's going on at home? You know, your child's a mess. So, yes.
How helpful were your recovery groups with your coming out issues as gay, or did you not?
Oh no, when I came out, I came flying out of the closet. There was like 2 people in Wyoming that didn't know. Yes, I went through those, you know, identity phases quickly, you know, and I was totally in the immersion phase where like rainbow head to toe, I shaved my head, I stopped wearing makeup. I was very dogmatic in college, which happens oftentimes when you go through that kind of identity phase, you just go to this extreme. I was in that extreme. And so for me, it wasn't an option. Like, I was a little bit, unfortunately, kind of in your face about it, like, I'm queer, I'm here, get used to it kind of thing. For the most part, everyone was very accepting within my recovery network, because I think people in the rooms of recovery, I mean, we all come from such diverse backgrounds, right? Because alcoholism and addiction touch everyone. I mean, there's no person left unscathed by this disease. And you know, we're in these rooms and we're just trying to learn who we are. We're trying to support one another. And so they tend to be, in my opinion, a little bit more supportive than your general kind of individuals or other maybe community groups, you know, because it is all about, you know, learning about yourself. You know, some were a little weirded out, but for the most part, they were accepting. Now, people on the college campus, absolutely not. I mean, I had things screamed at me, thrown at me. You know, the treatments, you know, in central Pennsylvania, it's not the most progressive hotbed of activity. So we had a lot of challenges, which hence all the hate crime activity that happened at Penn State during the time that I was a student there.
Well, with that, we'd like to thank you for coming. And for anybody who's interested, Jennifer will have copies up here that you can purchase from her or ask other questions. But please, thank you for all coming out this evening, and look forward to other events within Allies. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The books are $15 a piece, and I will autograph them and personalize them for you. Thank you.
Thank you.